I tell people that the next 6 years are probably we'll see more change. They'll create more churn, societal, economic, technological, behavioral than the last 60 did. And much of that is because of AI, certainly, but a lot of it is also just the context of the world. Things are becoming more uncertain in every direction that you look. So I think we need AI to make sense of the world, but it's going to be moving at a much faster clip than anything that we've become accustomed to.
Welcome to Engage Presents. I'm Engage co-founder and president Jake Olson. In this interview series, I ask Engage talent the most common questions we hear from event planners to help you get to know them and their stories in 15 minutes or less. Thanks for listening. Welcome to another episode of Engage Presents. I'm Engage president Jake Olson. Alongside me today, a fascinating man talking about a fascinating topic, Tom Koulopoulos. He is the founder of the Delphi Group. He is an AI futurist and the author of 14, you heard me right, 14 books. Tom, first, how do you find the time to write so much, my man?
It's almost a sickness, Jake. I have to sort of get stuff out of my head and put it down on paper, so to speak. And for me, it helps me to stay on top of things because when you're writing, you have to do the research. You have to sort of discipline yourself. And I love to write. It is just something that's been in my blood ever since I was a kid. In fact, I'm working on book 15, which is my memoirs, believe it or not.
How did I know?
Not the final chapter, not the final chapter. The final chapters are yet to come, but I thought it was about time to maybe document some of what I've lived through.
That's awesome, man. That's incredible. Someone who writes books myself. That's a incredible feat. And don't stop.
Exactly.
Right. So I know talking to features before, not that you have an 8-ball in front of you right now, but let's just say if you could predict what we'd be doing in 10 years with how we interact or use technology, what would be your best guess?
Yeah, I mean, 10 years seems like a lifetime today, given how fast things are moving. I tell people that the next 6 years are probably we'll see more change. They'll create more churn, societal, economic, technological, behavioral than the last 60 did. And much of that is because of AI, certainly, but a lot of it is also just the context of the world. Things are becoming more uncertain in every direction that you look. So I think we need AI to make sense of the world, but it's going to be moving at a much faster clip than anything that we've become accustomed to. So looking 10 years out, the simplest way to put it is that in the same way that today you can't leave home and leave your smartphone behind, I joke with people, I say, if you left your smartphone at home and you drove away, would you drive back to pick it up? And everyone says, of course I would. And then I ask, well, if you left your kids at home and forgot them, would you drive back to pick them up? And people laugh because no, their smartphone is the most important thing that they have on their person. It's how you become part of society. You can't imagine not having a smartphone, having ways to help you navigate, having Google and all these AI assistants to help you do research and answer questions. In 10 years, the best way I can put it is that it will be your oxygen mask. You will not be able to live without a constant AI companion. And the reason for that is that if you detach yourself from AI, you will be detaching yourself from society. It'll be that critical. And the value it will create for each of us individually will be so enormous that we simply will not be able to look back and answer the question, so how do we live without it? I think that's what's going to look like 10 years from now.
Very fascinating. And there's so many questions that branch off that I'm going to get to. But let's first kind of go back to your book and talk about the now instead of the then. Your latest book, Gigatrends. You can tell us kind of what's it about, but let's talk about what excites you most in this 21st century, what's happening now with the biggest tech trends.
So I love the way you asked that. I'll tell you quite honestly, what excites me most is that if we look at the 8 billion or so people on the planet today, generously speaking, 4 billion of them don't have identity. They don't have checking accounts. They can't take out loans. They don't have the ability to interact and be part of society the way you and I do. What excites me most is the democratization of AI and the power it will give those people to have identity, to exist somewhere on the blockchain, to have an immutable identity that allows them to be part of society. That, I think, is the most exciting thing that we will accomplish over the course of the remainder of this century. From a purely technological standpoint, what I find exciting is how AI is going to cause us to reassess what it means to be human. How do we add value as human beings? And that, I think, is one of the more interesting conversations to get into, because people always ask me, if AI is smarter than me, where does that leave me? If it can do my job, if it can, do all these things that today I take so much pride in, what does that mean for me as a human being? And I think we're being so short-sighted, Jake, and in not seeing beyond that. But those are the two things that really kind of get me going. How do we bring on board the other 4 billion? And what does it mean to us as humans going forward when we have an entity that is smarter than we are as far as our intellect goes?
Yeah, absolutely. And very interesting. I know I said the word exciting. It is exciting, but there are, and you kind of mentioned it there, the other side of the coin where the people who are a little anxious, who get a little, bothered by the change. What are some ways that someone, who is that way about technology can kind of stay adaptable or positive when it comes to, during these times of change?
So what I tell people is pick something in your life that really excites you. And it doesn't have to be professional, whatever it is. It could be that, you love painting, you love art, you love collecting antiques. I don't care what it is. Find something that excites you, that would get you up every single morning. And imagine having a complete day where you do nothing but that, but what you really love to do. What if AI allowed you to do more of that? Allowed you to subtract all the tedium and the administration from your day to day, all those things that you do with spreadsheets and digging through your email, all those things that take up time, but yet don't really add value. They add no joy to our life. What if AI could be an amplifier, a multiplier of the joy in your life? And people start to get it when I think, when they think about it in that sense. But today we see it as subtractive, but what it's subtracting are the things that I don't want to be doing and allowing me to do more of what I love to do.
I like that a lot. I like that a lot. All right, let's take it from the individual to like organization. So let's talk about how organizations, and we talk to them, balance the idea of balancing, forward thinking with innovation and the practical realities of running a business today.
Yeah. So what I tell people is don't begin where the most obvious starting point of a conversation usually is, which is how do I replace people with AI? That's the last step. The first step is number one, as an organization, how do I amplify people with AI? How do I do more of what serves my customer? How do I do more of what delights my customer? How do I focus my employees on those things that add greater value? How do I amplify the individual? The second piece is how do I augment the individual, allow them to collaborate with AI so that they can be not just more productive, but can be more innovative, can think more laterally, can think in ways that are more creative. And the last piece that you need to look at is then how do I replace people? And the replacement will happen. I mean, let's not be Pollyannish about this. We are going to be replacing people, but that replacement, as it's always been the case throughout history, is also going to result in greater value that we create as organizations. And that new value, while I can't tell you what it is because we haven't lived it yet, it would be like going back to the 1800s if we were farmers and we were talking about this. And I were to say to you, you know what, we won't need farmers anymore. You'd say, well, what are we going to do with all these people? 80% of the world economy is farming and agriculture. They're going to be littered all over the streets. We'll have unemployment that we can't deal with. It's going to happen in a much more compressed time frame with AI, but nonetheless, we'll find new ways to create value as humans.
I love how that's formatted. Awesome. All right, so back to kind of what we need now for the future. I heard you recently talk about this, and honestly, this has been something that I've paid attention to. And if you have and invested in some companies as of late, this is kind of where a lot of money's going. But how do we generate the need or the usage of electricity that's going to be needed in the really now, but for sure in the future? So nuclear, batteries. Kind of talk about that type of technology evolving to fit that need.
Yeah, the era of AI is primarily an era of power. How do we generate enough power without choking the planet in the process? Because traditionally, historically, power has been about not just nuclear, it's been about fossil fuels primarily. And the reality is we can't build nuclear power plants fast enough. Right. Wind power and alternative solar power, alternatives like that are not going to be adequate to power AI. So three things have to happen here. First, the technology itself has to become more efficient. So we have to look at alternatives to the traditional silicon-based approach that we've used to chip technology. And there are potentials there, not just in the realm of non-classical quantum computers, which are going to be much more powerful, but also alternatives to silicon, biological chips that have inherently much greater efficiency. And by the way, to bring this down to earth, not to be too obtuse about it, this gray matter operates on 5 watts. I mean, that's an LED light bulb requires 5 watts. If I do a query in ChatGPT, I'm using hundreds, not thousands of watts of power for the simplest prompt, the simplest query. So the technology itself has to become much more efficient. That's number one. Number two, we have to identify mechanisms by which we can generate power in non-traditional ways. So fusion, for example, I think is absolutely going to have to be accelerated in terms of research and development there. It is going to be a race to see who can develop the greatest sources of power in the fastest time frame. And let me give you a statistic here, which is astounding. If you look at global power production, we did a research study for the U.S. Utility industry several years ago. If you look at global terawatts produced in 2045, 2050, right around that 5-year time horizon, data centers alone at their current projected usage of power will consume all of the power that we produce globally. In other words, there won't be enough power left to power your hair dryer at that point. Wow. Data centers alone will chew up everything that we can produce. So something has to happen here. Something has to give. And I think it comes down to how do we make the technology more efficient and how do we find new sources of power, clean power, that will allow us to continue on this path. It's fascinating because you're right. The AI industry is at the mercy of the power generation industry. You cannot have AI continue to evolve without having power generation evolve as well. They go hand in hand.
And lastly, is that really the takeaway message that you would like your audiences to go home with is, hey, there's an opportunity here for innovation that we have done this. We're going to continue to do this together. And back to that point you're making about value, that there is value to be had and be created. So take a hold of that.
I love the way you put that, but the real takeaway that I want them to leave with that as well. It's a hopeful message, but the most important takeaway is that AI will elevate our humanity. It will not make us less human. It will not be subtractive. It will elevate and amplify the human condition, allowing us to do more of what we're worthy of as human beings, which is not just creating value for our organizations, but creating value for ourselves, living more enriching lives, more joyful lives. And I know that sounds overly optimistic, but again, I think we consistently underplay the degree to which we can create a better, brighter future. And I think we're right on the cusp of one of the greatest breakthroughs in the history of humanity in terms of elevating the human condition. The 4 billion that have yet to be brought on board, and the 4 billion of us that inhabit the world today, as you and I know it, I think we're all going to experience a much more hopeful future. And that's the message I want people to leave with.
Well, Tom, there's a lot of voices out there of pessimism, so don't feel like you got to be one of those. I love your voice of optimism. Keep going with it. We're very happy to be able to give you a platform to share that. So keep being that voice out there.
Thank you, Jake. I will do my very best. I appreciate the support.
If you want to learn more about Tom's story, what he talks about, very fascinating stuff. Obviously, to book him to speak, you can visit letsengage.com, check out his profile there, and do that. Thank you again, Tom, for your time today.
Thank you, Jake.
Stay tuned for more Engage Presents.